Today's class is the second class on federalism, and this will be the first class where there will be a participation check. In the middle of the lecture, at three different points, there will be keywords that I want you to fill in a online survey, which you will receive the link for. All right, let's begin. So, federalism. So today we'll talk about federal and state relations. We will assess the benefits and as well as some of the problems of federalism. And then we'll talk about what's been going on in American politics, which is red states and blue states, Republican states and Democratic states moving further apart in terms of their policies. All right. So let's start with federal and state relations. So the division of labor between the federal government and state governments seems very neat and orderly. If you look at the Constitution, there are enumerated powers, which are a handful of specifically stated powers that belong to the federal government, and everything else is reserved for the states, and that is why they're called reserved powers. But in fact, there are concurrent powers, powers that both federal and state governments share, as well as these flexible tools that the federal government has that allow it to move beyond what is enumerated. Start with the elastic clause, the power to make all laws necessary and proper to carry out the federal government's responsibilities, as well as the general welfare clause of the preamble. And finally, the commerce clause, which can be interpreted quite broadly to justify federal government involvement in areas that are not explicitly stated in the Constitution. We also talked about how the federal government's role in the economy, role in society, its power has dramatically increased since the 1930s. Both its size, how much it collects in taxes, its footprint in the economy, and all the resources it possesses, the expertise, the staffing. So the federal government's role has grown dramatically since the 1930s. So in real life, as we said, the division of labor between the federal and the state governments is quite messy. State governments have, as well as local governments, have the advantage they are closer to the population, right? The federal government's often Washington, D.C., far away. Well, the state idea better close the people who benefit from federal programs. And remember, at the end of the day, the federal government, the bulk of its resources go either to defense or go to social insurance, pensions, healthcare, etc. So it is an advantage for state and local governments to be close to the beneficiaries of social programs. Local and state governments have better knowledge of the needs of their constituents, the local population. So the federal government often relies on state and local governments to manage and provide the services it funds. So the federal government may be the one that runs Medicare and Social Security, but state and local governments may operate those programs for the federal government. The federal government also, given its size and its weight, has several tools that it can use to shape state behavior. So the federal government may not have the power to force states to do what it wants, but it might be able to induce them through incentives. Or carrots and sticks. What are carrots and sticks? Well, this picture tells us what carrots and sticks are. It comes from the example of getting a donkey to move. You're sitting on your donkey, and you can pull a carrot in front of it, and the carrot is going to make the donkey move forward to try to catch the carrot. So by offering a carrot incentive, you may make the donkey want to move forward. But the donkey may be resistant. The donkey may be tired, may not be into the carrot right now. But you also have the stick. The stick that is holding the carrot can be used to whack the donkey and force it to keep moving forward. The federal government has carrots to incentivize, to induce state and local governments to do what it wants, but it also has sticks, punishments. So in terms of sticks, the most notable one is unfunded mandates. Federal requirements on state and local governments, typically backed by penalties for failure to comply. And they come with very limited funds for implementation. So look at some examples. The Clean Air Act. The federal government passed federal legislation setting the conditions for cleaner air, but it left it to state and local governments to implement it. So they are required to implement this. They're required to nudge businesses and factories in their territory to comply with the Clean Air Act, but the federal government did not provide much in terms of resources to state and local governments. Or the implementation of the Americans with Disabilities Act. The federal government passed legislation requiring that conditions be made available to help disabled Americans access businesses and government agencies. RAMP, well, that became the law, but the federal government didn't really give state and local governments funding to be compliant with this legislation. In 2001, the Bush administration passed No Child Left Behind, a policy aimed at nudging underperforming schools to do a better job. And if they were not doing a better job, if they were not providing good enough education to their students, then they would be put on a list and kind of shamed, and also be more likely to be subject to heavy oversight on the part of the government. This, despite the fact that education is not explicitly part of the jobs of the federal government. Providing clean air, also not explicitly there. You could argue that good education, clean air, the ability of disabled people to access services, that's general welfare. Or it may be related to commerce in some way, but it's not explicitly stated in the Constitution. What happens if a state opposes an unfunded mandate imposed by the federal government? Well, they can sue. Remember, we said the relationship between states and federal government is a constant push and pull. And the referee in that push and pull is the court system. And at the peak of the court system, at the summit of the court system, is the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court, the ultimate arbiter, the ultimate referee in disputes between the federal and state governments. So here's your first participation word, Supreme Court. But unfunded mandates are the sticks, grants are the carrots, the incentives. The government also can provide positive financial inducements to get state and local governments to work towards the federal government's goals. Remember, the federal government has a ton of resources it collects through taxes. Those resources can be filtered to state and local governments, and they can be used to incentivize state and local governments to do what the federal government wants. Grants come in two forms. There's categorical grants, which are very specific. They limit what the recipient can do with the funds. There's very little discretion. So, for example, maybe I, the federal government will provide the government of California with money for roads,